Good evening. Welcome to today's Tropics for June 15th, 2021. Please note, I'm not a meteorologist, and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storm I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at IMPAS 92L, and this is pretty much still in the Bay of Campeche. There seems to be a vortex somewhere here under the convection in the very southern area of the Bay of Campeche. But it seems that after a few days, this isn't really likely to do anything on its own. Instead, the actual Central American gyre, as was always expected to form, will be the only formation out of this. However, there doesn't seem likely that will be imminent formation. Rather, probably formation within the next couple days after conditions improve a bit from where they are now. I can see that the spin has started to get a bit more north. You can see a general trough axis extending further north, even outside of the Bay of Campeche. So that is a sign that we're starting to get that gyro circulation to kind of lift north, and that process is beginning. And uh, this will keep going north until until it hits the Gulf Coast. And looking at the water vapor imagery, you can see why there isn't going to be any imminent formation. That's because the conditions just aren't quite there yet. We need a bit more time for things to evolve and start favoring a bit more formation from where they are now. See this upper level anticyclone that's over Mexico, but then you have this upper level trough over or north of that, and that goes into the Bay of Campeche, and then eventually you have a bit more of an upper anticyclone downstream of that. We'll talk a bit more about that later. But right now, that upper trough is imparting unfavorable conditions into the pretty much the entire Gulf of Mexico. But where that vorticity is in the Bay of Campeche, there's just a lot of westerly shear that isn't going to allow convection to keep going over it. And at the same time, there's this drier air in the darker colors here. So that drier air is a sign of subsidence, and you can see subsidence quite well because there isn't really much thunderstorm activity, and where there is, it's kind of light and it doesn't really persist too well. So that with the Central American gyre circulation also being still pretty anchored over Central America, it doesn't seem that we'll see this develop in the very near term, but within the next couple of days, probably going to seeing for consolidation into tropical depression. Let's take a look here at the modeled upper level wind pattern, just for comparison with a forecast or one of the model forecasts. And yeah, it's pretty easy to see why there isn't much going on right now. A lot of northwesterly shear pushing into the Bay of Campeche, and the Gulf of Mexico in general just has a lot of westerly flow aloft, and that is not going to allow convection to really get going much at all. And so in the very short term, probably not a whole lot going to be going on with this. However, you can see that it's things are starting to change now because in my latest video on this, which was on Saturday, most of that very high precipitable water value over 2 inches was generally confined only into the Bay of Campeche because that gyro circulation was further south. But now we can see it's starting to get further north, and that area is starting to get out of the Bay of Campeche and now is poking itself to the north for a couple of reasons. Some evidence of this is this area of convection. This is being helped along by some upper divergence, but at the same time, that is where the higher precipitable water is. So it is also a sign that things are starting to get a bit more north. And looking at the 700 millibar vorticity, and this is that kind of mid-level area where you can see the gyre circulation pretty well. You can see one, that it's starting to get biased a lot towards the Atlantic. There's some parts that are over these or over Central America still, and uh, over land and over the East Pacific. But a lot of it's, or if you kind of like take a center of this, it's starting to kind of nudge itself into the Atlantic. One thing you'll notice that though is it's very large, and it's pretty elongated, so it's got to organize and tighten itself some to become an actual tropical cyclone. And even after it starts to become more compact, it's still going to be a very broad sort of, very June-like system. And then two, you got this ridge to the east. For a while, you had this subtropical ridge here that is currently producing a heat wave over the American Southwest, and then this ridge in the this subtropical ridge in the Atlantic, and they're both kind of exerting roughly equal amounts of flow onto the Central American gyre. So it kind of stalled out over Central America for quite a while. But now with this trough that's passing by, you're having the subtropical ridge start to build itself to the west, and as a result, this one is starting to exert a bit more influence over the gyre, and so that means the flow is becoming a bit northerly, and that's allowed for the gyre to start drifting to the north slowly. Uh, Along with this, that upper trough that we're watching right now, uh, it looks to deepen and kind of dig and start to become a bit more negatively tilted. And so if you have this deepen and amplify, that means you tend to have the downstream flow amplify. And this is what is modeled tomorrow evening. And yes, indeed, you have this ridge that gets amplified ahead of the trough. And then with the troughing that's occurring with the passing long wave trough, that means you have a jet connection and a good, good amount of upper divergence here. So you're going to try to get convection in this area, and that will also kind of start to get a bit more of that vorticity bias to the north, and help pull Invest 92L up more into the Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, though, on Friday morning, the trough starts to pull out of the region, and that means that the jet connection with uh, the ridge that was ahead of the upper level trough starts to decay a bit. But at this point, you have a pretty stout anticyclone. Except the problem for 92L is that anticyclone is quite far to the southeast of it, so you're not going to get that kind of very good upper level flow that would get a more organized tropical cyclone going, something that you wouldn't really see that often in June. But instead, that upper trough is going to get continually even more negatively tilted at this point. And given the kind of close entanglement between Invest 92L at this point and the upper trough, it seems that it won't be totally tropical. Uh, but it doesn't really matter anyway, tropical or not. It's still going to be very broad and wet. However, the convection will still be able to prosper over this region with upper divergence, but instead of being under that anticyclone where the uh, biggest ascent is over the actual center and would kind of keep it centralized and more organized, you're going to have this convection more so to the north of the storm, and that is going to make it generally asymmetrical and not very organized looking. So it is going to be kind of your usual June sloppy storm. You can see on the precipitable water here, you can see that deep tropical kind of pipeline to the north, and this is allowing some that moist air to come up to the east of the system. And you can see where the upper divergence is, and this is to the north of the system. But you can see over here, except for this kind of wraparound, there's a lot drier trying to get in here. Probably also thanks to the upper trough. And so you can imagine what it'll look like on satellite. It would be quite lopsided here, and again, not too organized. However, there's still risk of flooding, as is usual with these storms, even though it isn't quite strong. This is a very broad wet system that could maintain some long-lived rain as it nears the Gulf Coast. Uh, Luckily, though, as it makes landfall sometime this weekend, it's going to round that ridge, and with generally westerly flow to the north, Invest 92L or whatever it is at this point will turn to the northeast and start accelerating into that westerly flow. So we're not going to have a kind of worst case scenario where it kind of stalls out or something over the south and causes a bunch of rain. Luckily, it'll speed out of there once it's done dropping rain from being over that area. So luckily, it won't be a major flooding event, but it will be still generally dangerous. We also don't know quite yet where exactly it's going to go, and we'll have to wait a couple of days before anything really until something kind of gets to consolidate, because that by then we'll know what the track will be. We know generally which direction it'll go. It'll kind of follow or around the ridge, go up generally north, and then start curving to the northeast as it nears or goes over land. The big divergence here is where it starts out. Where does that gyre try to consolidate into a tropical cyclone instead of a very big, broad, disorganized gyre? And so that you're getting a lot of divergence in the ensembles. Here's a GFS ensemble here. See, it goes really anywhere from Texas to Louisiana or Mississippi. And the Euro ensembles aren't really that much better. See, a lot of the members of the low pressure in the Bay of Campeche here, but then you have a whole bunch of spaghetti kind of we're not really starting in any one spot, so this is really anywhere it could start consolidating. And so you also have a big spread here, anywhere from that Texas coast here to Mississippi, basically. And that means until we have something consolidate, we won't really know the where it's going to track exactly. We know which direction in general it'll go. The Euro ensembles here also show that we know it probably won't be a very organized system, but we know it'll be very rainy. But in general, wherever the track ends up, look east of there and a bit to the north of it, or generally east of it, and that's where you'll probably get the heaviest rain. Here is the Weather Prediction Center QPF, so it's about how much precipitation is expected. Now, this is subject to a lot of change because this is basic, or this is based on where the system goes, and if it goes further west, you're going to get precipitation further west, and of course, if you have it go further east, then it's going to also provide precipitation further to the east. So we need to really pin down where the track is going to be before we can make any high confidence estimates of where the heaviest rain is going to be. But we know generally in the northern Gulf Coast, be on the lookout for Invest 92L and its rain. And if you're in a flood-prone area, especially if the rain gets further west, be prepared for that possibility of flooding this weekend as 92L and its moisture start to come ashore. And as always, stay safe. If you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.